From Captivity to Freedom, subtitled I Didn't Know I Was Deceived, written and read by Grace Josie. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 begins with a quote from Genesis 2, verse 24, and it reads, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother, and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." We were married on February 24, 1980. At first, Les and I wanted a small, private wedding at my house in Canada, but my parents asked us to reconsider. "Grace, you are leaving your family and moving far away to North Carolina. We will miss you dearly and want to give you a send-off that you won't forget." They were both sincerely wanting the best for us. I could see the earnestness in their eyes. We believe that weddings are important to celebrate with extended family and friends. When you include your community, it establishes your bond as a married couple in a special way that you probably can't understand now. Les and I talked it over. Reluctantly, we decided that we'd honor my parents' request, trusting their wisdom. They were paying for the hall, the food, and the flowers, so it made sense. God gave us a beautiful, fluffy white snow the night before. We believed it was His way of saying, "I'm blessing your marriage." The day was perfect. We had about 70 guests, most of which were relatives. Mom and Dad's church friends prepared a huge turkey dinner with all the trimmings. I chose white daisies and pink roses for the flowers. A friend of Mom's, who was a florist, made the arrangements. To save costs, I baked the wedding cake. Cream cheese icing with carrot cake sponge, decorated with pink roses that I learned to make from a home cake decorating kit. Again, it was a good distraction and kept me from missing Les so much before the wedding. My sisters, Hilda and Taylor, were the bridesmaids. Their dresses were a deep maroon trimmed with pink and white lace. My brother Landon and Les's friend Kevin were the groomsmen. They just wore dark suits. The big day finally arrived. My dad had my arm as we stood at the back entry door of the hall. Everyone was assembled. This was my moment to enter as Les's bride. I felt absolutely beautiful in the sleeveless satin and lace gown I had sewn, all for him. Over top of the satin white gown, I made an exquisite lace jacket with button cuffs on the sleeves that went from the wrist to the elbows. The buttons were white pearls fastened with loops that I had crocheted from fine white satin thread. On my head, I wore a hat-veil combination that I designed and decorated with lace and satin to match the dress. The back of the veil fell softly into a long, lacy train behind me, and the front of the veil lay delicately over my face. We had seen each other in our wedding attire before the ceremony, so that pictures could be taken. When Les first saw me, all dressed up for our pictures, his grin went from ear to ear. It was so neat to see. He told me later that it felt like he needed more lips to make a smile that reflected the wonder he felt about me in his heart. He had to fight back tears of joy. Now I was standing beside my father, ready to begin a new chapter of my life. My brother-in-law, Dave, finished singing a solo from the movie Fiddler on the Roof, entitled Sunrise, Sunset. Then the silvery wind-like melody of a pan flute began playing, Delane's Melody. This was my dad's cue to guide me up the aisle. I had listened to the romantic European song over and over before the wedding, imagining what the moment would be like. But what I had imagined fell short of the glory of the reality I was experiencing. It was altogether heavenly. Words cannot describe it adequately. I only had eyes for one person as we began to walk, my sweetheart, Les. He was waiting for me at the top of the aisle. Even from the back, our eyes met, captured in each other's gaze. A spiritual and physical force drew us powerfully towards one another like magnets. I felt like my knees might give way because the wonder and awe of the moment was just so overwhelming. I gripped my father's arm tighter. Then Les winked. His special wink, where his one eyebrow went up and the other went down, with a sparkle in his eyes that communicated 1,000 messages of love and assurance. I felt like everyone was holding their breath as they stood up from their seats to acknowledge and honor the much-awaited moment. I heard captivated gasps from various corners of the room. Could those be because of me? Beaming now, I felt light on my feet, dizzy with love and expectation of the wonder of spending the rest of my life with Les. I don't remember many of the details of the rest of the ceremony, except for our embrace and kiss when the minister said, "You may now kiss the bride." The electricity between us, the connection was enough to stop my breathing. We looked into each other's eyes and found each other's lips. What happened next was a big surprise. We felt the pleasure of God over us, the passion and fire of our love being sealed with his blessing. Ladies and gentlemen, I now present to you Mr. and Mrs. Les Josie, announced Mr. Wellington, our minister. And then we celebrated. The food was delicious, the guests were in awe, and the toasts were humorous and heartwarming. My father loved to tell jokes, and my wedding was no exception. So during the meal, he stood up to give a toast to us. Les, we welcome you into our family. You have a very precious young lady there beside you now. But we need to warn you about something. Grace has always been a bit sneaky. So watch out. She might surprise you in the most unexpected ways. Everyone was laughing and carrying on as he spoke, but I was completely baffled because this was the first time I had heard my father and mother characterize me in this way. Actually, my father's Dutch accent put a spin on the word and it came out as sneaky. I was determined to ask my parents about all this later, but I never got a chance. The time flew by. Everything we'd planned turned out better than expected. My homemade wedding cake didn't fall apart. It tasted moist and delicious, even though I had to freeze it for several weeks before the big day. I was so relieved. The dancing towards the end of the evening was magical. Then it was finally time to say goodbye to my family and homeland. A stirring melody began playing, Edelweiss, from The Sound of Music. It brings tears to my eyes. It was such a special memory. This would be our final dance before we made our exit down the highway together into our new beginning, full of anticipation, love, and joy. When we were out of sight of the hall, Les found a place to stop on the side of the road so we could catch our breath and finally enjoy being alone. Kevin, his best man, had put an envelope in his suit jacket pocket as we were leaving. Les reached to get it while holding my hand. Kevin told me to open this with you first, Grace. He ripped open the seal and read his friend's words of congratulations and blessing out loud. Inside, Kevin had tucked a $100 bill. That was a lot of money back then. Les was overcome and tears began to roll down his cheeks. Can you believe we finally made it to this day? Now you are my wife and forever we'll be happy together. I'm so happy. Overwhelming emotions caught in my throat too, and I felt moisture begin to gather in my eyes. I was speechless. We moved our heads toward each other and let our lips linger upon each other's in a long and passionate kiss. Our hands slipped around each other's necks. After the kiss, we pressed our faces against each other. Our salty tears of joy mingled together against our cheeks. We celebrated our honeymoon in Niagara Falls and then took several days to travel down to the coast of North Carolina. On the way, we stopped in Washington, D.C. to see the Capitol buildings, the Time and Space Museum, and the Smithsonian. All the while, when we were driving, we kept our ears tuned to the radio for weather reports. A major winter storm was in the forecast. It was swooping down from the north toward the southeast coast of the United States. Meteorologists on the news said it might go all the way to Florida before it blew out to sea. We didn't want to get caught in it, so we paced ourselves ahead of the storm. Les was teasing me. "Grace, looks like I'm bringing my sweetheart back to North Carolina and she is carrying some Canadian weather with her." His eyes were so playful, and there was that wink again. "I guess the people where I live will have an introduction to you by way of a big storm." I squeezed his knee and punched him in the shoulder playfully. "You make me laugh," I said. We arrived in Les's hometown on the same night that the storm hit, outrunning it by just a hair. As we went to sleep in our small rented house, we cuddled up together near the wood stove and heard the wind howling around the house as thunder and lightning catapulted across the sky, a phenomenon I had never experienced before, though I was from a colder region of North America, in Canada. It was called thunder snow. Winds reached 65 miles per hour and the temperatures dropped well below freezing. 22, can you believe it? 22 inches of snow fell in the area. Indeed, Les's northern bride had made her debut. The news reporters were calling it the storm of the century. The next day, we awoke to snowdrifts up to the roof of the house in some places. Drifts were piled up as high as 9 feet. We had to dig our way out of the front door. Later in the day, when the temperatures plummeted well below zero, the pipes burst under the house. We were without running water for the majority of the second week of our marriage. Not something we ever thought would happen, but we sure did get to know each other better as we improvised ways to bathe and use the toilet. We dug out an area behind the house between the snowdrifts, and it became our outhouse until the pipes were fixed. Thankfully, the house was heated with wood, so we were able to stay warm even though the power was out. Les's grandparents lived across the street from the little house we rented, Azelle and Pearl. They invited us over to eat our meals, otherwise we would have had to go hungry. There were no stores close by, and all the roads were closed. Granddaddy Azelle cleared a path between the houses using a plow that he attached to his farm tractor. As we waited for the snow to melt and the road to clear, I decided to talk with Les about my dad's comment from the wedding. "Grace is sneaky." Les's response was to rib me about it. So, do you know why he said that? What did you do as a kid to get you labeled as sneaky, as the sneaky one? There was a playful twinkle in his eye, along with a hint that he wanted to know more about my foibles as a child. I began to rack my brain, trying to figure out what sneaky acts I had been up to as a child. Before I could answer, Les interrupted my thoughts in a more serious tone. "Actually, Grace, what your dad said seems so strange to me because you are one of the most honest people I know. You tell more on yourself than anyone I've ever been around. It's actually one of the things about you that made you so attractive to me. Besides your beautiful long blonde hair and blue eyes." Kisses ensued. Then he laughed again. "You know who I think are the real sneaky ones?" He emphasized the N, and it came out as a snort. Now I was giggling. "The real sneaky ones are your parents. They wanted to tell me about your character flaw, but waited until after we were married on our wedding day." We both melted in a puddle of hysteria as we contemplated both of them engineering a plot to get their daughter married off and then tell all of her faults to her new husband once there was no turning back, scaring him out of his wits. We moved to a house in Morehead City near Les's family after the area settled down from the storm. Our love was bright and beautiful. 100 years would never be enough time together. I got a job as a receptionist at a nursing home in town, and Les continued to work at Wicks Lumber as a buyer. Finances were tight, and we didn't see much of a future for us in the area. So, after a year in North Carolina, we decided to move back to Pasadena, near Ambassador College and the WCG Church headquarters, where we believe better employment opportunities awaited us. Les landed a sales job with Arcadia Valve and Fitting when we arrived. A few weeks later, I was hired by the WCG as an administrative assistant in the mail processing center. We also got a job managing a 10-unit apartment complex in lieu of rent and utilities. It was located on Del Mar Boulevard, a busy 4-lane street lined with giant jacaranda trees near the WCG campus. When the trees bloomed, they formed a gorgeous purple canopy over the street. It was so beautiful. Finally, we had a good setup to begin saving some money, or so we thought. But Les developed some tooth and jaw pain, so he went to the dentist. His diagnosis? Impacted wisdom teeth. He needed surgery as soon as possible. It hurt for him to talk. It hurt for him to talk. Grace, how are we going to pay for this? We still have your student loan and my grandfather's money to pay back. The church teaches us to pay our tithes and give offerings, and a lot of that money goes to the poor, but I feel like we're the poor in need right now. He held his jaw and shivered. I pondered the idea of talking to Mr. Rillo, my boss and a leading minister at the WCG. Maybe he could help us know what to do. If he gave us permission not to pay our tithes for a few months, we would have enough money to get Les's dental surgery. But would it be okay to seek medical help? The church taught people to have faith in God for healing without medical help. I felt hesitant doing so, but I decided to share my thoughts with Les. Was I really considering the notion of disobeying God's laws about tithing and healing? Guilt and fear began to war against my compassion for Les. I saw no other solution, so I asked Les if he would pray about it with me. When the prayer ended, we both stood up. I don't see any other way, Les concluded with his brow furrowed. Please talk with him as soon as you can. The next day, I made an appointment with Mr. Rillo. There was a kindness about him that put people at ease, so I felt calm as I explained what we were facing. His answer surprised me on 2 fronts. He didn't say not to have the surgery, despite the church's teaching on healing. In fact, he said nothing about faith and healing, and he agreed that it would be okay to use our tithe money to pay for the costs. As he finished giving me his guidance, he added, Grace, just remember, once you get the medical bill taken care of, start up your tithing again. It's a command and a blessing for you and Les. I was so relieved. The surgery was scheduled, and once the wisdom teeth were removed, Les's jaw pain completely went away. We resumed tithing as soon as we paid off the bill. Apartment managing was an interesting job because of the tenants. They were all different in age, nationality, vocation, and personality, and since Les and I were so young, we appreciated the opportunity to interact with people that we normally wouldn't have interacted with. It helped us grow our people skills, and it was an education to see how other people lived. One tenant stopped paying rent, and we had to work with law enforcement to have her evicted. She left the unit in a terrible mess. When she was finally gone, I went in and discovered she had left piles of trash on the floor, rotten food in the refrigerator, and months of messy buildup in the kitchen. Whew, it smelled so bad. In order to get the apartment ready for a new tenant, the maintenance and cleaning crews would have a lot to do. Our apartment butted right up to the sidewalk on Del Mar Boulevard. There was constant traffic noise. People parked their cars alongside of the street at night. One morning, we were awakened at 4:30 to a terribly loud sound. We both jumped out of bed in total bewilderment. When we got our bearings, Les peeked out the window. Someone had plowed right into the rear end of the car parked outside our bedroom window, only about 10 feet from our bed. Both vehicles were badly damaged. The driver must have been going at least 40 miles an hour when the impact happened. I called 911. Les went outside to see if he could help. The driver who ran into the parked car was obviously drunk, so Les told me to stay inside the apartment. But the guy didn't seem to be hurt too badly, so Les had him sit down on our porch steps. Once the police arrived, we told them what we had experienced, shut our door, and tried in vain to get some sleep before work. The next day, we had to deliver the news that one of our tenants, the next day we had to deliver the news to one of our tenants that their car had been totaled. Living on that busy street got old really fast. We began to make plans to move, but we had to be patient for money to accumulate in our bank account. At work, we both applied ourselves with diligence. Les landed a few big accounts, and after about a year, we had enough money coming in that we decided to resign from the apartment management position. We found a nice one-bedroom apartment with a big balcony just a few blocks away, and eventually we were able to buy some furniture of our own. We continued to work and save money. Life was good together. We often took day trips on the weekends to local attractions or overnight camping trips to wilderness areas in the mountains close by. The bond between us grew stronger and stronger each day. Since we married young, we literally grew up together. Our habits, lifestyles, points of view, and interests meshed in a lot of ways. I felt completely swept off my feet most days. Les fulfilled his role as my husband in so many kind and thoughtful ways. We became best friends, and our love grew more and more intimate. A few years later, Les thought it was time to begin looking for another sales job, one with higher pay. He had received some excellent training in sales through Arcadia Valve and Fitting, but he was ready to step up another rung on his career ladder. It didn't take long, only a month of working with a recruiter. He was offered and accepted a sales position covering the Southwest with TechSwipe. So he was offered and accepted a sales position covering the Southwest with TechSwipe. The company sold consumables to pharmaceutical, aerospace, medical device, and microelectronic industries. His salary nearly doubled. At the same time, we heard about an apartment management position with RPI, Real Property Investments, that was open in San Gabriel at a 32-unit luxury apartment complex named the Royal Oaks. We applied and got hired immediately. So I quit my receptionist job and we moved into the 2-bedroom apartment that was designated for the manager. What an education we got in dealing with issues and people at this place. Tenants came to us with all kinds of problems: job loss, divorce, noise complaints, broken appliances, and financial issues. There was never a dull moment. One day, some faulty electrical wiring caught on fire in a vacant apartment. Thankfully, a tenant was walking past the vacant apartment when the fire began. She called me because she smelled smoke. I immediately called 911. Fire trucks arrived, and the firemen put out a blaze in the kitchen that had started near the water heater. As managers, our sleep got interrupted often when tenants locked themselves out or the metal security gate at the parking lot entrance jammed. It happens so often. Overall, though, we enjoyed living there, especially helping out some of the older tenants who had lived there for years and years. It was there, after 7 wonderful years of marriage, that we conceived our first child. We were both excited beyond words. I had to pinch myself sometimes. Was this really happening? But the morning sickness, my protruding belly bump, and maternal feelings confirmed it. We were definitely having a baby. Les came alongside me with such tenderness and care during my pregnancy. Being under his watchful eye made me feel absolutely secure, especially on days when I felt tired or stressed. I was so happy that our child would have a good father who was intimately involved with his family and would provide well. About a week before our baby was due, Les made one last business trip to a major account of his in Mesa, Arizona. He said that he would only be gone for one day, would leave in the wee hours of the morning and return that night if it was okay with me. I assured him that I would be fine, but just to be sure, I checked with my OBGYN. The doctor agreed it would be all right for him to go. He kissed me goodbye at 4:30 a.m. Sleep came quickly after he was gone. The last trimester of my pregnancy was very taxing, and my body welcomed all the rest I could get. I planned to sleep as long as I wanted. However, the Whittier Narrows earthquake hit at 7:42 that same morning, October 1, 1987. I was still asleep when it began. The quake measured 6.8 on the Richter scale in San Gabriel. It sounded like a freight train hit my bedroom wall and entered the room at high speed. I jumped out of bed, grabbed under my large belly for support, and ran down the hallway to the dining room where I hid under our large wooden table. The chandelier above it swung back and forth wildly, glass rattling. More tremors followed the initial shock. The phone rang in the midst of it all. Our neighbors and dear friends, Tim and Marcia Greenwood, called to tell me they would be right over in case the shock of everything triggered labor. When Les landed in Arizona, he picked up his rental car and, as his habit was, he turned on the radio. A news broadcaster began making an announcement just as he turned the dial. A major earthquake has just hit the southern San Gabriel Valley. Alarmed for my safety, adrenaline began coursing through Les's body. He drove the rental car right back around to the lot entrance and took the next flight home. He was determined to get back as soon as possible. It was late morning when he arrived, never more glad to be back with me. We felt a lot of tremors in the days following. It was a scary time for us. The apartment complex sustained a good bit of damage. Our tenants had dishes fall out of the cabinets, pictures fall off the walls. There were cracks in the sidewalks and up some walls. We sustained about a half-inch crack along the wall from floor to ceiling on either side of the fireplace in our apartment. Thankfully, no one in the complex got hurt, and I didn't go into labor until 5 days later. On October 6, 1987, we gave birth to a perfectly formed, blue-eyed blonde baby girl, Kimberly Renee. What an experience! As the nurse cleaned and swaddled her body, Les wiped my forehead with a cool, damp washcloth. "Grace, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy. Can you believe we have a baby girl?" My body began to tremble, and tears were streaming down both our cheeks. With assuring love, he kissed my forehead and spoke again. "Everything's going to be okay. Just rest, Grace. The doctor and nurse will take good care of you. I'm here, forever here for you, my sweetheart." As he spoke, the nurse called out, "Mr. Josie, your baby recognizes your voice. She's turning her head in your direction." Then, lifting the precious bundle off the table, she placed our baby in his arms.